At Christmas, my son raised a glass and asked if I'd receive my $10,000 allowance. The room gave a polite ripple of laughter, the kind that belongs to crystalline tuxedos. Music from the quartet stitched itself between chandeliers. I sat at the last table near the service door, where drafts slip in with the waiters and knees graze linen-draped chair legs. A festive centerpiece blinked red and gold, casting little halos on the silverware, as if holiness could be manufactured by batteries. I hadn't been on a guest list for years. I had been appended, a favor, a prop, a father-shaped placeholder. The place cards arranged rank and relevance in careful rows. Mine had been tucked beside an ice bucket sweating onto a napkin, as though my name might bleed if anyone looked too long. When Michael spoke, the crowd leaned toward him the way flowers turn to light. He wore prosperity as if it were tailored with the suit. Broad smile, easy cadence, the casual reach for big numbers that make other men feel lucky to stand nearby. He told a story about hard work and gratitude, about the season, about remembering where you come from. Then he lifted his flute and let that sentence fall. The allowance, the 10,000, me. A few faces turned toward the back of the room, seeking the exhibit. I handled my water glass, letting the condensation mark my palm. My mouth found a smile that didn't touch my teeth. I waited for the joke to resolve into something harmless. It didn't. The quartet stopped between carols, and the silence laid a thin sheet of ice across the carpet. Sophia caught my eye as if by accident. Her lipstick was the color of ripe fruit, and the expression behind it faltered half a beat. Only half. Surprise, then calculation, then a return to charm. A tiny seam had opened in her poise. She smoothed it with a blink. I thought of cans stacked 2 by 2 in my cupboard, of the stubborn heater that coughed then gave up, of December mornings that smelled like old bleach. 10,000, each month, spoken into a room that believed it. People wanted to believe it. Belief paired well with prime rib and warm rolls. You could feel the room prefer the story to the man sitting near the mop closet. A young server slipped a bowl of sugared pecans near my elbow and whispered, "Sir?" Half question, half comfort. I thanked her. Her shoes squeaked. She vanished back into the choreography of service, and I was invisible again, which is its own kind of relief. Michael continued, his voice at a measured temperature. He thanked donors, praised teams, blessed families. My name was the garnish, a sprig for color, proof of a son's character displayed without the awkwardness of proximity. Around me, the applause warmed back up. People signaled assent by touching their napkins, by nodding toward each other as if generosity could be triangulated. I looked down at my hands. The knuckles have learned to keep their counsel. There are calluses that no one in this room would recognize as a record. I turned my wedding band, widower's habit, nothing to do with marriage anymore, everything to do with memory. In the glassy reflection of a centerpiece ornament, I saw the old man version of me. Collar a little tight, suit borrowed from a neighbor whose shoulders were broader. It fit the part they had written for me. Present, grateful, contained. Someone at our table murmured, "Beautiful," meaning the speech or the season, I couldn't tell. Another guest, snow-white hair, velvet jacket, asked if I preferred red or white. He meant wine. I said water was fine. He smiled too broadly, relieved to have done the polite thing. When the toasts ended, the quartet slid into silent night, and conversation rose in careful layers. I could feel the press of my own heartbeat, steady but louder than usual, like a drummer learning restraint. Words swam around me. Venture, valuation, vision. Every V in the alphabet polished and placed. I tried to build a bridge to a gentler explanation. Perhaps Michael had set something aside without telling me, some future-minded arrangement that needed a word like allowance to please a crowd. Perhaps I'd missed a letter, a call. I replayed recent months, envelopes that held bills and nothing else, voicemails about meters and minimums, the quiet arithmetic at the end of each week. The bridge couldn't span the distance. Sophia approached on a length of satin and perfume. Her hand touched the back of my chair, then didn't. "Comfortable, Richard?" she asked. The concern painted fine and thin. "As comfortable as I look," I said. Her smile pinched. "Michael speaks from his heart," she offered, as though I'd questioned an organ. "Does his heart print statements?" I asked, aiming for gentle. It came out steady, a beat. "It's Christmas," she said, the universal solvent. Then the beat ended, and she was drifting again, collecting smiles and obligations, tying little bows with her gaze. I watched my son from the distance he had assigned me. The lighting admired him. It has always been kind to men who believe in their momentum. He greeted people by first name, recalled details, promised coffees, posed for a photo with a man whose watch could buy a quiet house. He did not look at me again. Somewhere near dessert, a gentleman with a trout-patterned tie leaned in. "Your son's a marvel," he said. "Not many remember their people." I wanted to say, remembering is not the same as inventing. I wanted to say, 10,000 is a number you feel in your grocery bag. Instead, I nodded. He left satisfied with my answer. Men often are. The staff brought out miniature cheesecakes, the kind that disappear in 2 bites. I ate mine slowly, tasting lemon and effort. The door beside our table coughed cold air onto my ankles each time a tray passed through. Off to the side, a busboy laughed at something in the kitchen. A clean sound, unadorned by performance. It reminded me of my son at 5, holding up a paper star. When coffee came, I stood to stretch an ache that had settled between my shoulders. A woman I barely knew touched my sleeve. "You must be very proud," she said, not unkindly. "I am," I answered, "because there are nights you borrow a word to pay for your place." Pride, tonight, was alone. At the bar, a row of bottles watched everything with glassy eyes. I asked for tap water and a slice of lime, something to do with my hand. On the mirror behind the bartender, the room reflected itself. Pillars, garlands, men adjusting their cuffs. My face appeared at the edge of the frame, a footnote to a festive paragraph. The pianist took over from the quartet and teased a carol into jazz. Lights dimmed half a click. The club manager tapped a spoon against a glass, summoning attention for one last flourish. Michael returned to the mic to thank the staff, to acknowledge the year, to bless the road ahead. His voice softened, the way voices do when they want to belong to everyone. I listened for any small correction, any sentence that might rescue truth from the paper napkin version of it. None arrived. The room swallowed the night the way wealthy rooms do, without crumbs. I put my empty glass on a tray and retrieved my coat from the back of my chair. The lining had a tiny tear near the pocket, a secret only my fingers knew. My table companions were trading cards and promises. No one noticed my chair grow vacant. That is one gift of invisibility. You can leave without disturbing the centerpiece. At the threshold I paused, hand on the brass, and glanced back. Sophia was laughing. Michael was already mid-story with a new circle. A spray of evergreen framed the doorway, shedding a few needles like a clock. I stepped into the corridor, where the carpet swallowed sound and the air lost its sugar. Outside, winter had licked the parking lot into black glass. A breath hung before my face, then thinned, then was nothing. I stood under the portico lights and felt the question begin to form. Not a word yet, but a weight, a shape that would need paper and time. My hands shook, not from the cold, but from the arithmetic of that sentence in there and the ledger in here. Richard left the party in silence, his hands trembling but his mind crowded with questions. I came home to a cold apartment. The fridge held a single onion and half a bottle of milk. The bulb over the sink hummed and took its time to warm, spreading a tired circle of light across the counter. The heater clicked, considered its duty, and then exhaled air that felt like it had traveled through a mile of tin. Outside, winter pressed its face to the thin window, fogging the glass where the seal had given up years ago. I set my keys in the chipped dish by the door, a dish once meant for olives at parties, and opened the refrigerator again, as if a second look might change the facts. Onion, milk, a shrug of light on empty shelves. $10,000 a month had just been offered to a ballroom, and my kitchen gave me arithmetic I could do on my fingers. The coat slid from my shoulders with the weight of a shift ending. On the table lay yesterday's mail, a coupon flyer, a notice from the power company reminding me I was only one mercy away from darkness, and an old envelope I'd been using as a bookmark in a library paperback. The envelope was soft with age and fingerprints, corners fuzzed. When I pulled it closer, a corner tore, and a folded slip inside crinkled loose. A bank receipt, months old, printed in tidy lines. Transaction, check deposit, amount, 10,000. Endorsement, a signature I didn't recognize at first, and then did because the last name used to be a maiden one before it was a married one. S. Torres. I traced the loop of the T with my thumb, the way you do when you're not sure if your eyes are honest. The ink held. The heater coughed again. My breath lifted in the kitchen like a ghost that refused to move on. 10,000 had found a home. It simply wasn't mine. I sat, palms flat to cool laminate, and let the room be quiet enough to listen to the small sounds that prove a life is still in motion. The neighbor above me shuffling a chair, pipes settling like old men into metal chairs, a bus yawning at the corner. The club's chandeliers were a different universe, one measured in flutes and applause. Here, the light comes from bulbs with dust around their throats. I peeled the onion's papery skin because hands need a task when minds begin their long walks. The knife found the cutting board scars. The sweet bite of it climbed the air, and an old picture rose up with it, uninvited and welcome. Michael at 9, shoelaces muddy, cheeks raw from wind, running with a spool of string in his fist. A field behind our rental, grass bent like waves, the kite bucking and then giving in to the pull. "I've got it!" he yelled, not looking back, trusting that I had the other end. The line thrummed between us, my hand, his hand, the sky taking what we offered and giving it shape. There are days when memory is a gift, and days when it's a bright knife. Tonight it cut neat and deep. Somewhere between that field and that ballroom, a different line had been tied, one I hadn't felt in my hands. I rinsed the knife, turned off the hum at the sink, and brought the envelope under the lamp. The receipt had a date I recognized, 2 days after a holiday. In my calendar, it had been a day of leftovers and a double shift. My bank statement from that week had read like a haiku. Short lines, nothing wasted. The endorsement on this slip read like a direction of travel, away from me. 10,000 is a number with weight. You can feel it in rent paid on time, in groceries that don't require math in the aisle, in heat that arrives without haggling. I thought of the girl at the country club placing sugared pecans by my elbow. I thought of Sophia's smile, the small seam that had opened in it. Names matter in rooms like that. They hang off wrists and whisper on lapels. On paper, they matter more. My phone vibrated, a promotional text wishing me joy and offering 10% off a streaming service I'd never use. I turned it face down. Joy is not a coupon. It is a working thermostat and soup that doesn't come out of a can 3 nights running. On the shelf above the table sat my notebook, the cheap kind with a cardboard cover that frays at the corners. It had started as a list of due dates and reminders to pick up light bulbs. It had become, slowly, a record. Meters, miles, totals, names of men in offices who promised to look into things. I reached for it and paused. There's a moment before you write the first word when your life still belongs to an earlier version of itself. Once you begin, the room rearranges. Before the pencil touched paper, I read the receipt again, catching the bank's branch number, the teller ID, the hour. Noon. Noon is when executives disappear to private dining rooms and ordinary people eat in their cars. I pictured Sophia at a counter, nails glossy, signing with the name she'd put away for weddings and contracts. The signature didn't look rushed. It looked practiced. Another memory rose, smaller but bright. Michael at 5, concentrating so hard his tongue peeked out, knotting the kite string to the crosspiece. "It has to hold," he'd said. "It will," I'd told him, and believed it. A boy learns about wind and trust at the same time. A man learns how easy it is to remake the meaning of both. I stood and opened the pantry. A heel of bread in its plastic, 2 cans of beans, a box of rice with a rubber band around it. I made toast, scraped the last butter from the foil, and ate leaning on the counter. The house clicked and sighed and was honest in its small ways. The club had been loud and generous with its fictions. "All right," I told the room, "let's stop guessing." I dated the top of a fresh page, Printed my name, because there are days you need to remind paper who it belongs to, and drew 3 columns: date, amount, where it went. I copied the numbers from the receipt and wrote, carefully, endorsed by S. Torres. Below that, a question mark that looked like a fishhook. Then I added another line: December, ballroom, public claim, $10,000 per month to father. Beside it, I wrote the word discrepancy, a polite word that can grow teeth when it needs to. The pencil darkened as my hand remembered old speeds. I listed the last 3 months of bills and the balances left after paying them. I left room for names. I left room for answers, and the possibility that some of them might be the kind that make a man choose his next breath instead of speaking. I looked up at the window. The glass had cleared. The world outside the pane was ordinary and cold. Somewhere, a child tugged a string and felt a pull from something larger than himself, and didn't question it yet. I hoped he would keep that feeling for a long time. I hoped he would not learn the other version too soon. The milk, when I lifted it, had gone a day past the label but not past usefulness. I poured a little into a glass, watched it leave a white ring like a faint moon, and set it down on a coaster with a picture of a lighthouse. Lighthouses exist because rocks do. That is their practicality and their poetry. The receipt lay beside the notebook, half tucked, like a bird unsure of its nest. I slid it fully under the page edge to keep it, to claim it. There would be more paper. There always is when money decides to travel without a map. My job now was to keep the trail from scattering. I turned a fresh page and, slower this time, began to write. Dates, sums, the word allowance with quotation marks I could feel even without drawing them. Questions gathered in the margins, small and sharp, ready to find their shape. Older people are often treated as confused. I remember every number Gravel crunched under the loading bay as the night shift shuffled in. Coffee steam, breath steam, all rising to the same tired lamps. Inside the warehouse hummed its fluorescent hymn. Ballast buzz, conveyor belts ticking like distant metronomes, a forklift's backup beep needling the air. The floor held old stains the color of pennies. The air carried machine oil, wet cardboard, and the faint metal bite of winter that slips through the dock doors no matter how quickly you roll them down. I clocked in and felt the scanner's red line pass across my hand like a tally mark. A broom waited by my cart. The mop bucket sulked in its corner, wheeled and dented, a veteran of better nights. Lower back first, then the knees, then the shoulder, pain announcing itself in order like names at roll call. My body and I have an agreement. I give it warm socks and steady work. It gives me enough obedience to make it to morning. Evening, mister. B, Deshaun called, pushing a pallet jack like it owed him rent. 22, shoulders for days, earbuds permanently lodged. You ever gonna retire and write that book? Already writing it, I said, tapping my temple. Cheap paper, plenty of ink. He grinned and rolled past, music ghosting from one bud. You should let your billionaire kid buy you a beach, man. The joke landed soft. He didn't mean harm. Jokes are cheaper than raises. I pushed the cart down aisle 7, bulk cleaners, bleach caps bright as hard candy, and let the rhythm take me. Sweep, lift, stack, breathe. Neon light flattened everything to 2 dimensions, but the details stayed sharp. Case counts, sticker codes, the heft of a gallon in my palm. Confusion is a luxury in places that run on inventory. On the far wall, someone had taped a cutout of a red kite from a hardware flyer. It had been there since spring, a joke about drafts from the dock. Tonight it snagged the corner of my eye. I saw a field again, Michael's small hands, the string singing between us, the tug that told you the sky had agreed. He'd laughed so freely it felt like oxygen. When the wind faltered, I ran backward, arms wide, believing motion could summon weather. Yo, Mr. B. Mateo, kid with a constellation of acne and a heart he carried too close to the surface, coasted by on a broom. You need me to take the high shelves? I've got the ladder, I said. You take the line near the compactor. Watch your step. He nodded, relieved. The compactor scares the bold and the weary. It has a way of making you think about endings. Someone popped the tab on an energy drink. aluminum sigh echoing off concrete. Over the intercom, a supervisor blessed us with numbers in a cheery voice you reserve for toddlers and quotas. I scrubbed a scuff mark that had decided to be permanent and thought about a room with chandeliers, about a raised glass, and a sentence said into microphones that translate wealth into virtue. 10,000 a month. In the country club's carpeted world, the number had been applause. Here it was floor wax and overtime and a heater that coughs. Mr. B, you ever think about Florida? Deshaun again, parking the pallet, stretching his back. Like sun, oranges, golf carts. My aunt says her neighbor down there gets a check every month and sits on a porch naming birds. I name labels, I said, turning a bottle so the brand faced out. Cheaper than birds. Don't fly away when you blink. He laughed, then looked like he wanted to apologize for the thing he hadn't said. You good though? I mean, I'm vertical, I said. That's good enough for a Wednesday. Vertical keeps a man on a ladder. I climbed to shelf 3 and cleaned the lip where dust gathers like a quiet vote. The bristles made a dry whisper. A memory moved in beside the sound. My wife at the kitchen table, pencil behind her ear, bills spread like a small city. We'll make it work, she used to say, tapping a column into behaving. She'd been gone long enough for grief to find its slower pace, but tonight I heard her as if she'd just lifted her head. Richard, check the totals twice. I smiled at the shelf. I do, I told her, 3 times sometimes. In the break room, the vending machine hummed beside a bulletin board with curling flyers. A lost cat that had been found, CPR training, a payday lender's crooked grin. I sat with my back to the microwave and ate a sandwich I'd assembled from last loyalties in my fridge. The bread had given up, but it still remembered how to hold together. You know, Mateo said around a mouthful of chips, my granddad, he forgets stuff. Names where he set his keys, but he can tell you what he paid for gas in 1978. My mom says old minds are weird like that. Some of us misplace keys, I said. Some of us keep ledgers in our sleep. Must be nice, he said, not unkindly. Nice, I echoed, tasting the word. It's a kind of work. We went back to it. The night stretched. The intercom coughed. Somebody dropped a case. The crack rang down the aisle like a warning before thunder. I mopped a spill that tried to be bigger than it was and felt the ache in my spine settle into a steady, companionable throb. Pain is honest. It tells you where you've been. The mind, left to itself, wanders to rooms that smell less like ammonia. It found the ballroom again, the tuxedoed bravado. It found the moment the room paused, waiting for me to nod along like a good prop. There is a cruelty particular to public benevolence that never arrives at your door. Under the neon, with the mop handle in my grip, the sentence came clear and clean, with no music to blunt it. I am being used as a shield for his reputation. The words fit like a key in a lock. No drama, just the click that tells you the door you've been pushing is meant to open the other way. Mr. B? Deshaun had drifted close, maybe catching the look on my face. You need a hand? I'm fine, I said, and meant it in the way a man means he knows the shape of his next step. The last hour is always the longest. The clock grows a mean streak. I made the rounds, signed the log by the supervisor's desk with the pen that only writes if you threaten it, and hung the mop where it sleeps. The bay door rattled as the wind put its shoulder to it one more time. I took my lunch pail and walked to the car, breath leaving small ghosts. The Ford greeted me with its usual complaint. The radio, when it caught signal, offered me a preacher, a ball game, and a commercial for Miracle Gutters. I chose quiet. Neon bled into dark as I turned onto my street, the warehouse receding like a ship fading into its own fog. Upstairs, the apartment smelled like colder air than it should. I set the pail on the counter, reached for the notebook, and flipped to the page I'd started. Dates, amounts, names. If you treat a life like inventory, sometimes the shortages tell you more than the stock. My back loosened as I sat. The pencil weighted in my fingers. The lamp threw a steady circle of light across the paper, and the receipt I'd tucked under the flap. My breath fell into that old, workable rhythm, counting, not pleading. The phone rang. Michael calling. Dad, do you have enough to eat? Michael's voice was smooth, but there was strain underneath. The question hung in my dim kitchen like a polite insult. I had left the lamp off and let the streetlight paint a rectangle on the table. The notebook lay open where I'd left it after my shift, pencil balanced across the gutter. Pipes ticked in the wall, counting down to midnight. I could see my breath once, then not at all. The heater liked to tease. "I manage," I said. "I've been thinking about you," he went on, words arranged like flowers. "It's cold. Do you need space heaters? Groceries? I can have someone drop off a card." The faucet dripped, an honest sound in a room that needed one. "A card is a lovely idea," I said. "So is a deposit. Tell me something, son. Why are there checks in Sophia's signature in the exact amount you announced at the club?" Silence. Not the good kind. The kind where a man at the other end of the line leans away from the wound to see if it will stop bleeding on its own. "You're confused," he said carefully. "We set up things in a way that makes sense for us. Families consolidate. It's more efficient. Sophia manages a lot of logistics so I can focus on work. Consolidate," I repeated. "Efficient. Words that make theft sound like tidying. You know how it is," he said, gentle brightening, salesman returning to his pitch. "One pool, one set of statements. It's simpler than wiring money in circles. It would be simpler to send it to the person you say it's for." I kept my tone low, steady. There's a power in not matching another man's volume. If there's a structure, show it to me. If there's a ledger with my name, let me see the column. A whisper rustled through his side of the call, barely there, the glide of silk over wood. Sophia's voice has a shape even when it doesn't form words. Paper moved, a throat cleared. He covered the receiver for half a second and didn't quite succeed. "Dad," he said back in my ear, "this is why I hate talking details. You fixate. You don't see the whole picture. We've set up a vehicle that protects you. It's not always about cash in hand. There are tax considerations, timing. I'm trying to look out for you. I'm 67, not 6. The pencil rolled to the edge of the notebook and stopped on the coil. "I've balanced more than tax timing on a folding table. Stop telling me what I can't understand. Tell me where my money is." "You're getting agitated," he said softly. "Listen to yourself. This whole thing started because you misremembered something in a crowded room. It happens with age. Let me handle it. Gaslight has a smell, I've learned. It's like a pilot light that never catches, that whisper of unburned fuel." "I remember exactly what was said," I replied, "and what wasn't in my account." He tried a new angle. "You've always been proud, Dad. I respect that. I'm trying to respect it now by not dumping spreadsheets on you. There's a trust. That's the point. You're covered." "What trust?" He exhaled through his nose. I could hear it in the small pop against the mic. Another slight cover on the receiver. A muffled vowel that sounded like my name, said too close to a palm. "The RB Trust. It centralizes things. It's standard." There it was, the slip a man makes when he starts to believe his own story can walk without a cane. The letters hit my ear like coins on a ceramic plate. "RB," I said, "for Richard Bennett. For record keeping," he corrected quickly. "Labels help. You of all people should appreciate that. Look, there's a lot of context you're missing. We've been routing support in ways that, if you saw the whole," "The whole," I said to keep him honest. "The whole includes my refrigerator and my rent and the number of times I've made eggs for dinner in a week. The whole includes a check register in your house that carries Sophia's maiden name and my monthly ghost. How about we do something very old-fashioned? How about you send me the latest statement from the RB Trust tomorrow?" "That's not how this works," he said, something brittle peeking through the velvet. "It's a consolidated structure. Statements are internal." "Internal to whom?" "To the family." "I am family," I said, slow as a judge. "Or was that just for the toast?" Another whisper. This one's sharper, like a fingernail finding a seam. He lowered his voice. "Don't make this public, Dad. Please, you'll embarrass yourself. You'll embarrass me. People don't understand the complexities. You'll invite bad actors, the kind who prey on the elderly," I said. "Say the word. Then listen to me say one. Paper. Send it. You're not being reasonable. I'm being specific. He tried kindness again, the padded hand returning to the pressure point. How about I send a delivery tomorrow morning? Fresh fruit, pantry staples. We'll sit down after the holidays and go through things with our accountant. It's Christmas. Try to enjoy it. There are people who care about you. You mean the ones who write my name on envelopes they keep? I said. Dad, the plea sounded almost real. Almost. Let me take care of you. You can start by telling the truth. The line thinned to static. Somewhere in the background, a door shut, soft and expensive. He cleared his throat, sliding back into certainty. The RB Trust handles your support. We'll get you documentation when it's processed. Don't worry about it. I worry on schedule, I said. The first of each month. That's when rent is due. I could feel the moment his patience changed shape. When persuasion gives way to control, you hear it. The vowels harden. We'll revisit this. For now, drop it, okay? I'll call you tomorrow. Do, I said. And bring the paper. He hung up first. He always has. The apartment gathered its small sounds again. The tick, the drip, the building's old lungs sighing. My eyes adjusted back to the dark. I could see the rectangle of streetlight, the gleam on the pencil, the soft bruise of my knuckles where the mop handle had rubbed them raw. I replayed his words, not for meaning but for edges. Consolidate, efficient, vehicle, covered. The phrases men use when they need you to trust architecture you're not allowed to enter. Underneath them all, the thing that mattered. A name assigned to a promise that had never knocked on my door. I reached for the notebook, smoothed the page, and set the pencil down with the care you give a small, precise tool. I wrote slowly, each letter like a rung on a ladder I could climb even in the dark. Richard writes 2 words into his notebook. RB Trust. First text from Maria. Sophia is arguing with Michael in the office. I read it twice at my small kitchen table. The yellow bulb humming over a chipped salt shaker. The notebook weighted open beside my mug. Today's page still damp at the edge where a drop of water had landed. Maria never dramatized. If she sent words, they'd fought to get past her caution. Another ping followed. She's telling him what to say. He's just nodding. I wrote the time down. Then I wrote nodding, because there are verbs you need to see on paper to believe them. A soft knock. Alan, coat unzipped, eyes alert, stood in the hall with a 6-pack of cheap seltzer like a peace offering. Heard things are noisy, he said, stepping around my boots. He used to work for Michael. He knew the rhythm of that office, the way decisions were staged, the way signatures appeared. He placed a flash drive on the table as if it might bite. Public stuff only, vendor rosters, a few archived newsletters, staff org charts, but the names mapped to inboxes. If you need more, I'll find the path without breaking anything. I felt the tremor in my fingers start up and stop. We keep it clean, I said. No shortcuts. Clean, he echoed, and looked relieved to have the rule. I called Patricia from the landline because it makes a sharper sound in my ear and I needed edges. She listened more than she spoke, then numbered the air with calm fingers I could hear even through the cord. Photograph everything you already have. Store copies in separate places. Do not confront anyone. Do not answer numbers you don't know. She paused. And eat something, Richard. Paper is lighter after soup. I heated a can while Alan scrolled through the org chart on his phone, reading titles as if they were weather patterns. Steam fogged the window, blurring the parking lot into a gray square. Another buzz lit my old laptop. An email with no name in the from field, and a subject line that read only, I believe you. The message was short. A man from Houston, years back. He described the glide of a woman who could turn certainty into a pen stroke, how he'd been talked into a boutique investment, how the money went quiet, and so did he. He had never told anyone. Shame has a heavy lid. Your words, he wrote, pulled mine open. I stared at the screen until the letters steadied. Then I forwarded it to Patricia and added no comment. There are notes you don't accompany. My phone rang almost at once. Patricia's voice was brisk, but there was something warmer braided through it. Save the headers. We'll verify the sender. This establishes pattern, not just incident. A breath, then a verdict. I could feel in my chest. Scope just changed. I wrote about hands lifting champagne while an old father gnawed cold bread. The sentence looked too sharp on the screen, but I left it. Midnight held the apartment still. The radiator ticked like a tired metronome. I sat at my wobbly table with the old keyboard that sticks on the letter S, and I began to tell a quiet truth to no one in particular. The allowance everyone applauded, and the refrigerator that hummed behind me with nothing to cool. I kept the names out. I kept the numbers plain. 10,000 a month spoken into crystal. Beans and stale bread counted in the dark. I described the country club's soft light and my own narrow hallway with its scuffed paint. Then I pressed publish and listened, because sometimes silence answers back. A minute passed. 2. The page view counter blinked from 0 to 1, then to 3. A comment. I hear you. Another. My brother called it help and put the card in my name. I answered with small words, careful not to turn anyone's hurt into my victory. The post drifted into a forum for caregivers, then into a neighborhood group where people usually argue about potholes and trash pickup. Links multiplied like coat hooks along a wall I hadn't seen. By 2 a.m., the replies came in clusters. A retired nurse wrote that her son opened a gas account she'd never used. A man with a union badge said his daughter managed his pension while he managed to sell tools to pay winter heat. A widow typed that her boy kept her debit card for emergencies, and every day was apparently an emergency. I read until the words blurred, then blinked them clear and wrote back, keep receipts, write dates, take pictures of paper. Your memory deserves help. It felt strangely like a kite catching wind. One string, then a lift I didn't expect. My story wasn't alone anymore. It rode on other hands and screens, rising where my voice could never have gone by itself. The notifications stacked into a thin, insistent column. Somewhere in that climb, I felt less like a shadow on the edge of someone else's life. Near 3, the tone changed. 20, then 50 short notes with the same shape. He opened a credit card in my name. They called it Joint for Convenience. I thought I was the only one. I copied each into the notebook, a line for every stranger, because paper turns noise into evidence. When I finally pushed back from the table, the window glass had gone from black to the soft gray that predicts morning. One last message slid into view from an account with no photo, no history, only a single sentence that pulled my breath tight. Meet me in the parking lot. I have documents. Alan handed me the bundle of emails in the parking lot, the yellow light flickering overhead like a witness. The lot was nearly empty, wind slicing between concrete pillars. My hands shook, though I told myself it was only the cold. Alan's face looked older under that failing bulb, his eyes darting to the edges as if shadows had ears. He pressed the thin folder into my grip. Printouts of emails where Michael and Sophia discussed shelters and deductions with the care of thieves drawing maps. We shouldn't linger, he whispered. His voice was tight, not with nerves alone, but with the knowledge that once you step across this line, you don't walk back. We bent close, our words muffled by the winter air. I asked how he had found them. He shook his head, said only that careless men leave careless trails. I held the pages against my chest like breath itself. Each line of text was another crack in their story, another confirmation that I hadn't been imagining numbers vanishing or names scribbled in places they didn't belong. For a second, I thought of the kite Michael once flew as a boy, and how I had trusted the string would hold. Now the string lay in my arms, twisted, written in ink that told of betrayal. A low rumble interrupted us. Headlights swung across the lot, and a black car rolled in slow, deliberate circles before stopping too near. Alan stiffened, his jaw set. I need to go, he muttered, already stepping back. Keep it hidden. Don't trust anyone. He turned into the dark, leaving me with paper and pounding blood. The engine of the black car idled. I forced myself to walk steadily, not run, each footstep echoing louder than it should. The folder felt heavier with every step, as though it knew it contained more than paper. It carried years of silence waiting for daylight. Back at my apartment, I locked the door, let my breath spill out, and almost laughed from the release. Then I noticed the slip under the door. A single sheet, typed, folded without care. 4 words in thick black font stared at me. Stop, or else. No one believes the forgetful old man until the lawyer taps the table and says, "This is enough for a subpoena." Patricia's office smelled like paper and winter. Frost clung to the window corners. Files rose in careful stacks, each tab a small flag planted on a hill I had climbed by inches. I laid my folder on the desk and spread its contents the way a mechanic lays out tools. Receipts with dates circled, photocopies of checks in Sophia's maiden name, the printouts Alan had risked to bring me. Patricia read in silence, lips pressed thin, pen tracing a slow underline. She buzzed Jennifer in. The assistant district attorney arrived with a notebook and a calm that looked practiced. She didn't waste my breath on sympathy. She asked about chains of custody, where I'd stored originals, who had seen what and when. I answered from the spine, not the throat. The questions were short. The answers were shorter. Jennifer tapped the email thread where Michael joked about keeping the parents' support numbers stable. Her finger moved to the bank receipts that paired neatly with those dates. Then she touched the photocopied checks, $10,000, month after month, to S. Torres. That, she said, tapping once more, is enough for subpoenas. The word landed with weight and air at the same time. Patricia's chair creaked. Mine didn't. I'd learned not to shift when it mattered. Jennifer outlined the next steps. Preservation letters, subpoenas for account records, internal communications, surveillance footage. You don't talk to them, she said. If they call, note the time and the words. Let us do the talking, Patricia added, and keep duplicates off-site. I nodded. The notebook under my palm felt warmer than the room. Jennifer paused at the door and looked back. Mr. Bennett, are you prepared to face your son in court if this goes there? My throat didn't answer. My hand did. It tightened around the notebook's edge until the cardboard sighed. I finally managed. I'll be steady. It wasn't bravado. It was a promise to myself. They walked me through signatures and chain of custody forms, then sent me into the bright cold. The sky had that dull shine winter gets when it's holding back snow. I tucked the folder close, the way you cover a small fire in wind. Back home, the hallway smelled of dust and old heat. An envelope waited on my mat. Cream stock, heavy, embossed in navy and gold. Investor Appreciation Dinner, the card announced, with a time, a room, and my name spelled correctly for the first time in years. The microphone sat beside the cake like a dare. Navy and gold ribbons cinched the room tight. Glass chimed. Flatware whispered across china. From the back table, my usual, I watched the stage lights polish Michael until he gleamed. He spoke of legacy, of families standing shoulder to shoulder, of gratitude that runs both ways. Laughter came easy, the kind rooms practice. Sophia glided between donors, her hand landing on wrists with the accuracy of habit. Maria, carrying a tray, let her eyes meet mine for half a breath. Alan hovered near a column, posture loose, gaze sharp. My name drifted through Michael's speech the way a violin note sometimes slides beneath a melody. There, then gone. He didn't say father. He said provider, foundation, the abstract nouns that don't stain. When applause rose, my hands stayed still on the linen. The microphone waited, black and patient beside a cake iced with someone else's pride. I stood before my feet could argue. The club manager read the weather in my face and brought the stand. The weight of the mic surprised me. The way truth gets heavy when lifted in a room like this. Thank you, I said, not to them, not at first. To the servers carrying plates heavier than anyone admits. To the band for lending us air we didn't earn. Smiles flickered, compliment is a soft key. Then I turned the lock. I went home from the last time we were here to a refrigerator with a half bottle of milk and a single onion. I scrubbed floors at night. I balanced ledgers with pennies. A wrinkle spread across the audience, curiosity pressing against comfort. I kept my voice slow. I've been told I receive $10,000 a month. I have asked to see it. My bank account is a quiet room. Sophia's smile froze at the edges. Michael's jaw tightened into angles. I held up a photocopy. Checks in Sophia's name, month after month, for the exact amount that was spoken over champagne. I let the paper drop to my side. And a trust, RB trust, that no bank can find, but lots of people can talk about. The room exhaled without meaning to. Phones lifted. Someone coughed and caught it halfway. Margaret, at a table near the front, stared at Michael as if a mask had slipped and she couldn't decide whether to pick it up or kick it. Michael stepped toward me, palms open. Dad, you're confused. Arrangements are complex. We centralize for efficiency. The accountants. Then let paper speak, I said. If I'm wrong, I'll stand here again and apologize to every soul present. Bring the deposits. Bring the statements older than last night. Silence deepened, the kind that has weight and shape. I could hear the band not playing. I could hear my own breath do what Patricia had taught me, through the open door, out on the close. I didn't look at Sophia, but I felt her voice skim the room. This isn't the time or place. For years, I said, I have been used as a story that photographs well. Tonight, I'm just a man asking for daylight. I set the mic on the stand. It thudded softly, as if agreeing. A chair scraped, shoes pressed carpet. A man I didn't know rose from the middle row, face pale, eyes clear. He lifted his hand, voice steady enough to cut the hush. A stranger stood up. Sophia conned me the same way. People began pulling out their phones, recording every word. The room shifted from performance to evidence. Screens rose like small moons, catching my face, Michael's practiced jaw, the slow tightening at the corners of Sophia's mouth. Silverware froze midair. Even the band held their instruments like men holding hats in a church vestibule. Margaret stood without ceremony. Michael, she said, clear as glass, does your father actually receive $10,000 a month? No cushion, no lace. The question took the carpet out from under the room. Michael's smile tried to return and failed. There are structures, Margaret, family planning, centralized disbursements. Then let's not plan, I said, voice steady. Let's verify. Anyone here who believes I'm paid that sum, come with me tomorrow to the bank. We'll look at deposits, not promises. If I'm wrong, I'll stand in this spot and apologize to each of you by name. A ripple traveled through the crowd, suits turning to whisper to sequins, donors recalculating their posture. Richard Hoffman, from a table near the back, lifted his chin. Statements older than yesterday, he called. That's the only kind that matter. Sophia stepped toward the stage, smile sharpened to a blade. Cut the microphone, she told the club manager, low and clipped. He met my eyes, then hers, and didn't move. The sound system hummed on. A quiet act of courage no one would applaud. Michael reached me, fingers closing on my sleeve. Up close, I could see the tremor in his jaw, the effort to hold the old charm in place. Let's step outside, he said through a grin that wasn't one. Talk like men. I've been a man my entire life, I answered, not pulling free. Now it's time to talk the truth. The sentence landed like a key turning. Conversations stalled. A guest lowered his phone, as if the naked ear might better catch what happens when a story leaves the stage and becomes a record. Dad, Michael said softer, pleading threaded with warning. You're making a scene. No, I said. I'm making a ledger. Margaret's voice again, surgical. If not to him, then where did the money go? Heads turned to Sophia with a new arithmetic. Her smile thinned to nothing. She lifted her clutch, chin high. This is a sick room, she announced to no one and everyone. We're done here. Without waiting for agreement, she turned for the doors, heels striking the floor like a metronome. Michael hesitated. For an instant, he looked 12 again, checking the wind before the kite goes up. Then he followed the orbit he'd chosen. Sophia walked out. Michael followed, leaving the room steeped in doubt. The next morning, my name appeared on the front page of the Dallas Morning News. I read it standing at the sink, coffee going lukewarm in my hand. A still from the dinner sat above the fold. Me at the microphone, not shouting, just speaking. The caption used words like allegations and viral exchange. Outside, the trash truck rattled past as if nothing had shifted. Inside, the air felt newly thinned, easier to breathe. By mid-morning, the doorbell began its polite siege. Reporters left cards and soft-voiced requests through the wood. I didn't open. Patricia called first. "You've done enough speaking for now," she said. "Let the paper speak." She walked me through 3 sentences I could say to anyone who reached me by phone. "Thank you. No comment. Please contact the district attorney." I wrote them on a sticky note and put it beside the receiver like a life preserver. At the library, every public computer wore my name in the sidebar of news sites. The videos multiplied, shaky angles, clipped captions, my words framed by chandeliers. I watched too, then stopped. It's a strange thing to see your own face carry a story you live from the inside out. Emails stacked in my inbox like folded shirts. Some were gossip in a friendly tone. Some were knives sheathed as advice. And then the other kind arrived. A man wrote, "Sophia approached me years ago about a boutique investment. I didn't report it. I was ashamed." A woman wrote, "My daughter opened a card in my name. I thought silence was protection." I answered none of them, but I read every line, adding dates and initials to my notebook the way a careful man lays stones across a stream. The one that stopped me came near noon. "My daughter took my pension, said it was safer in her account. I haven't told anyone. Your voice at that microphone made me pick up the phone to call a lawyer." I sat with that sentence a long time, the way you sit with a hymn after the choir has left the room. Patricia texted, "Heads up, things are moving." I stepped to the window and parted the blinds. Sirens threaded the cold. On the local feed, playing soundlessly above the laundromat across the street, I saw cruisers nosing up to Michael's glass doors, blue lights washing over the logo as agents carried boxes through the frame. The paper before me bore my signature, but in another hand. Cold light hummed above the conference table in the DA's small room, turning the copy paper a faint blue. Jennifer slid the page toward me with 2 fingers, as if it were delicate or poisonous. Patricia sat at my left, legal pad ready, pen uncapped, eyes on my face instead of the document. I let the edges of the sheet touch my fingertips before I looked down. There it was, my name bent into a shape I recognized and did not. The sweep of the R tried to be generous. The Bennett dragged on too long, heavy as if someone thought weight equaled truth. "I always lift the pen on the last T," I said, tapping that tail. "Right here. A little gap like a breath on this line." The T was pressed flat, smothered into the N. Whoever wrote it believed pressure could stand in for memory. Jennifer nodded. "This authorized recurring transfers into an entity labeled RB Trust." She didn't add the word non-existent. The exhibits had already said it for her. She pointed to the notary stamp. Wrong style, wrong office. Then to a date that placed me halfway across town polishing a warehouse floor. Paper, when trained, tells time better than a watch. Patricia leaned closer. "We'll pair this with the bank footage and the employment records of the notary. It forms a spine." Her tone was steady, but I felt the quiet anger she kept holstered for days like this. My phone vibrated against the folder. I shouldn't have answered, but old habits know doors. Michael's voice came through softened at the edges, like it had been sanded for company. "Dad, there's confusion about a form you signed years ago," he said. "Can you tell them you might have mixed up a page? We can correct it. No need to make this ugly." I watched my false name gleam under the fluorescent light. "I didn't sign this, Michael." Silence opened, wide enough to fall into. He tried again. "Memory is tricky. You taught me that." I heard a breath, a whisper, not his, Sophia, or the idea of her. Then the pitch of his voice dropped. "Just say you signed in a rush, that's all." "A wrong signature can't live a lifetime," I said. The sentence surprised me with how calm it sounded. It dies the moment the real hand shows up. He exhaled, something between a laugh and a threat. "You'll regret this." The line went dead. I set the phone face down and let my pulse find level. Jennifer had waited without speaking. "Thank you," she said simply. "That's on record." She slid another document forward, crisp as a new sheet on a hospital bed. "We're convening a grand jury. Your testimony may not be needed on day one, but your presence will." Patricia circled a date on her pad, then wrote it again on a sticky note and pressed it to the inside cover of my notebook. The ink looked bolder than usual. "We'll lock your originals, walk in with copies, and keep your voice quiet until it counts," she said. I traced the little lift of my true T in air, a muscle's old habit returning like a bird to a branch. Outside the window, the courthouse flag snagged on a faint wind and let go. Jennifer gathered the exhibits, stacking them square, every corner aligned. "We'll issue subpoenas this afternoon," she said. "You'll get formal notice of the grand jury schedule before close of business." When we stepped back into the hallway, the fluorescent hum followed us a few paces, then fell away. My phone buzzed again. Not Michael this time, but the official ping of an email from the DA's office. The subject line was 5 words that tightened the day into a single chord. "Notice to appear, grand jury." On the day the grand jury sat, I carried my battered folder like the record of my life. The courthouse air was colder than the street, a kind of institutional chill that pressed words flat. Patricia guided me to a small waiting room, the kind with a humming vent and chairs that had learned patience. Jennifer stepped in only long enough to squeeze my shoulder and say, "Today the machine turns," and then she was gone down a corridor where my feet weren't allowed. I sat, opened my notebook, and wrote the time, the room number, the way the fluorescent light trembled. Through the wall came voices in different keys, lawyers tuned to calm, clerks tuned to speed. Maria passed with an investigator, eyes steady, chin high. When she returned, she gave me a blue ink nod. "Done." Alan followed, sleeves rolled, jaw set. He went in with a thin stack and came out lighter, as if paper could lift a man. A banker in a gray suit arrived next, carrying a box that clicked when it touched the floor. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. His job was to let ledgers speak. I wrote his time in my notebook too, the way a man marks the progress of rain across a roof. Near midday, Jennifer slipped back with news pitched low. "Sophia's counsel requested a proffer," she said. "Hints of cooperation. Truth for consideration." Patricia's pen paused above her pad. "Weather, not destination," she murmured, and I breathed through the thought the way a man breathes through a stitch in his side. If a bridge wobbles when the river rises, it is still a bridge. Hours loosened and tightened. I counted them with coffee sips and short walks to the window, where the flag caught and freed itself on a thin wind. Now and then Jennifer returned. The emails had read clean. The surveillance matched the dates. The notary stamp did not. Each report slid another stone into place. My folder lay across my knees, warm from my hands, heavier than its pages. Late afternoon, the hallway felt like a church just before the hymn. Jennifer stood in the doorway with a small, contained smile, the kind you wear when you've carried something fragile across a crowded room. "All major counts have been returned," she said. "Elder financial abuse, forgery, tax fraud, conspiracy." Patricia closed her eyes once, opened them, and reached for my hand. I wrote the words down, one beneath the other, the letters marching like boots toward an end I had believed in, but not presumed. We left by a side stair that smelled of dust and old paint. Outside, the sky had cooled to pewter. Patricia drove in silence, the good kind, the kind that lets a day find its final shape. At my building, she said, "Eat something warm. Keep your phone on. We'll sleep in shifts if we have to." I nodded and climbed the stairs, each tread a small sentence. Home was the soft tick of the radiator and the faithful chair by the table. I set the folder down and touched its cover the way a man touches a name carved in wood. The hall light bled under the door. Then, a measured knock, practiced knuckles. I asked who it was. "A friend to your family," came the smooth reply, the wealthy mentor whose grin had sold rooms on my son's behalf. The chain stayed on. He slid a folded paper toward the gap, the slick weight of a prepared statement. "A simple acknowledgement," he said, voice warm as a checkbook, "that you misremembered. Sign, and the city can breathe again." Michael's attorney said I was destroying the family legacy. The words arrived over the phone like a verdict rehearsed in a mirror, measured, confident, meant to close a door I had only just opened. I let him finish the speech about goodwill and discretion, then set the handset down and listened to the apartment breathe. Pipes clicked in the wall. The radiator sighed. I stood by the doorway, palm on the wood, feeling its grain the way a man reads his own lifeline. Pressure gathered with the morning like weather. An old golf partner called to suggest I let it go for everyone's sake. A neighbor from years back knocked, eyes darting toward the hall camera, and whispered that rich people have long arms. On the sidewalk, a man I barely knew clapped my shoulder and said I could still be remembered kindly if I didn't make this bigger. Kindness, in their mouths, sounded like a leash. I walked to the park to sort my thoughts, the cold air trimming them to size. Geese cut the pond into even lines. Children chased each other along the path that used to be my route to the night shift. I practiced breathing with the door. Inhale on the open, exhale on the close, and let the rhythm nail my feet to the ground. Patricia called while I watched the water. "They'll press on every hinge," she said. "You just keep the frame square." I told her I would. She didn't thank me. She knew it wasn't a favor. By dusk, the mentor reappeared, the one with the handshake that sold rooms. He stood in my corridor as if it were a stage too small for his suit. He offered a letter crafted by careful hands. A draft, clarifying misremembered facts. He smiled like a man offering a warm coat. "This keeps your name clean," he said. I held the paper without opening it and gave it back. "A clean name doesn't need polish," I said. His smile tightened. "You're making enemies you don't need." I closed the chain and let his cologne fade from the hall. Later came the soft knock I knew without hearing. My son. His voice through the wood was thinner than I remembered. He said he was sorry it had come to this, that investors were spooked, that a single signature from me could quiet the room, and he would take care of everything. The word care scraped. I kept my hand on the knob, steady. "An apology cannot repay a debt of honor," I said. Silence stretched. He asked if I was choosing strangers over blood. "I am choosing the truth," I answered. The hinge hummed under my palm. Something in me had waited years for a clear action. I slid the deadbolt, felt its seat with a sound that belonged to me, and stepped back. The door stood between us like a line drawn with a carpenter's chalk, snapped once, straight and blue. I stayed there until his footsteps thinned down the stairs. When he was gone, I wrote the time in my notebook in a single sentence. Today I kept the door. The phone vibrated on the table. Patricia again. Voice low, words careful. The clerk had called her office. The schedule was posted. The trial date was set. The courthouse smelled of old paper and the held breath of dozens of people. The seal on the wall stared down, and the clock clicked like a metronome for nerves. I sat behind the rail with my folder, habit, not necessity, feeling its thin weight steady my hands. Patricia leaned in, her voice a hush meant for one ear. "Breathe on the open, out on the close." I nodded and counted to 4. Jennifer began as she always does, without thunder. Binders opened, screens warmed. A banker explained signatures and stamps. The projector threw gray images onto a white pull-down. Transfers, dates, initials that wore my name like a borrowed coat. Then the camera footage, Sophia leaving a branch with a folder, while a man I'd never met pressed a faulty notary stamp. The jurors didn't flinch, but more than one leaned closer, as if the light itself carried weight. Maria walked to the stand with a dignity that made me sit taller. She spoke of checks addressed to S. Torres, invoices routed through a company that owned a view I'd never seen. When the defense tried to fit fear into her mouth, she set it down gently and answered only what was asked. Alan followed, shirt pressed flatter than his voice. He told them how he printed only what policy allowed, why he left, and why conscience outlasts a paycheck. He let the word disgruntled belong to him and then defined it. Not anger at losing a job, anger at theft. At last, Sophia. Her counsel guided her through a garden of errands and misunderstandings. She smelled of expensive soap even at a distance. Jennifer's questions trimmed the shrubs. Who named the HB fund? Who built a spreadsheet that pretended to be a trust? Was it to mirror reality or invent it? A pause, then the petal fell. We created a phantom fund to conceal the transfers, she said, each syllable no louder than a thread pulled free. My name was called. The oath tasted like cold water. I described floors I had mopped and shelves I had faced in a December night when generosity arrived in a tuxedo. I told them about a refrigerator that hummed louder than the applause, and a signature that tried to mimic how I always lift my pen at the final T. I kept my eyes on the jurors and not on my son. When the question came, what did I want? I let the sentence I had carried for months stand on its own legs. I don't want my son in prison. I only want the truth to have a place. No one moved. Even the clock seemed to listen. The judge read the instructions, careful as a man measuring twice. Counsel gathered their papers, the air loosened by a single notch. Patricia touched my sleeve the way you test a railing. Firm, not possessive. I wrote the time in my notebook and closed it like a prayer book after service. The jury retired to deliberate. The jury returned, and the whole room held its breath. The foreperson stood, a single sheet trembling just enough to catch the light. The clerk's voice was steady. The words were iron. Guilty, fraud. Guilty, forgery. Guilty, exploitation of an elder. Guilty, conspiracy. Each verdict landed like a chair set squarely on the floor. Somewhere behind me a woman exhaled, the sound of a string cut free. Patricia's hand brushed my sleeve, one brief, anchoring touch, and then pulled away so I could stand on my own weight. Reporters surged the moment we cleared the doors. Microphones rose like winter weeds. I kept my folder tucked to my ribs and gave them the only sentence I had promised myself I'd give. Check the paper. They wanted more. How did I feel? What did I plan? Did I forgive? But feeling and plans are not evidence. Paper is. By afternoon, the courthouse steps were only stone again. I walked to the small park a few blocks over, where the wind sharpened the faces of bare trees. A boy in a red knit cap sprinted the length of the lawn, the plastic kite behind him stuttering, then catching, then riding the cold like it had been born to it. His mother held the reel without fuss, eyes soft, grip sure. I stood at the fence and let the old ache visit, blue as December, and then watched it pass by. There are losses you do not repair. There are names you can. I thought of the night in the club when a tuxedoed lie asked for applause. I thought of the warehouse light, of Maria's steady oath, of Alan's careful prints, of Jennifer's quiet ferocity, of Patricia's patience with my breath. If there is a legacy worth the word, it is not a portfolio. It is the permission a person gives another to stand up straight. The calls would keep coming. Papers to sign, forms to file, restitution to pursue, perhaps letters from strangers, and from people who were never quite strangers. I was not naive about mornings, but I had something I had not carried in a long time. My name out in front of me, clean as good bread on a plain plate. At home, I set my folder on the table and filled the kettle. The window showed a thin slice of sky, winter bright and honest. When the whistle rose, I poured, sat, and opened my notebook. The page waited the way empty rooms do, patient, without judgment. I wrote the date. I wrote the hour. I wrote what the clerk had said, and how the jurors' shoes sounded when they filed out, and the color of the boy's cap in the park. Then I wrote the only line that belonged, at the end of a long, old road, and I closed the covers slowly, like a man closing a well-made gate. The doors are open now. Let the light do its work.